So we study different ideologies between Gandhi and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So here he, so education is an important factor, important things. So Gandhi was against the English systems of education. It also against the use of English as a medium of instruction. So he wanted education to be in the vernacular. He advocated free and compulsory education for all boys and girls between 7 and 14. Okay, by 14 years. In Gandhi's view, education should be an integrated approach to the full development of the personality. It should be include physical training and high moral principles, along with intellectual and cognitive development. He differentiated between learning and education, knowledge and wisdom, literacy and lessons of life. According to him, literacy in itself is no education. So the here to Gandhi morality, sorry, Gandhi wanted to be a part of education, taking a leaf from Plato. Gandhi said that education should be a means of attaining knowledge and wisdom. That ultimately means of attaining should be a means of attaining knowledge and wisdom, and that ultimately place the seeker on the spiritual path. The end of education was not merely a means to make a career and achieve social status. Education should be a means to enlightenment. Gandhi also wanted Hindu scriptures to be a part of education, and as they propounded discipline and self-resistance. He conceived his Nai Talim or basic education for all in 1937. Nai Talim aimed to impart education that would lead to freedom freedom from ignorance, illiteracy, superstition, psyche of servitude, and many more taboos that inhibited his thinking of a free education. Thus, this scheme of education was to emphasize on holistic training of mind and body, so long as with academic there was to be purposeful manual labor. Okay. So handicrafts, art and drawing were the most fundamental teaching tools in Naitalim. As Gandhi wanted to make Indian village self-sufficient unit, he emphasized on vocational education, which increases the efficiency of students in undertaking tasks in those villages and make the village a self-sufficient unit. Subhash Bose was not watched for higher education, especially in the technical and scientific fields. Subhash Bose was for higher education, especially in the technical and scientific fields, as he wanted to as an industrial India. He said national reconstruction will be possible only with the aid of science and our scientists. We wanted Indian students to be sent abroad for training in accordance with a clear and definite plan, so that as soon as they returned home, they became proceed straight away to build up new industries. Second World War and nationalistic response. Upon September 1, 1939, German attacked Poland. The actions that led the Second World War. On September 3, 1939, Britain declared war against Germany and the British. So, government of India, the British government of India declared India's support for the war without consulting India's opinion. Congress offered to Viceroy. Though the Congress did not like the unilateral action of the British of drawing India into a war without consulting the Indians, it decided to support the war's part conditionally. So the holistic of the Congress to fascism, Nazism, militarism, and imperialism had been much more consistent than the British record. The Indian offer to cooperate in the war effort had two basic conditions. After the war, a constituent assembly So they converted to determine political structure of a free India. Immediately, some from the genuinely responsible government should be established at the center. The offer was rejected by Lendle's viceroy. The Congress argued that these conditions were necessary to win public opinion for war. Okay, so the Congress Working Committee meetings at war, the official Congress positions was adopted at the war the session of the Congress Working Committee. But before the different opinions were voiced, okay, on the question on Indian support to British war effort, Gandhi, who had all sympathy for Britain, okay, in the war, okay, because of his total dislike of the fascist ideology, advocated an unconditional support to the Allied powers. He made a clear distinction between the democratic nations and of Western Europe. He made a clear distinction between the democratic nations of Western Europe and the totalitarian Nazis and fascists. Okay, and he said that he was not willing to embrace the British government during the war. Subhash Chandra Bose and other socialists such as Acharya Narendra Dev and Jayaprakash Narayan, who had been invited by the Congress to attend the war, the meetings, so that different opinions could be discussed, and had no sympathy for either side in the war. In their opinion, the war was being fought by imperialists on both sides. Each side wanted to protect its colonies, possessions, and gain more territories to colonize. Sorry, to gain more territories to colonize. Okay, so neither side should be supported by the nationalists. In fact, they thought it was the ideal time to launch a civil disobedience movement, to thus take advantage of the situation and snatch freedom from India. Jawaharlal Nehru was not ready to accept the opinion of either Gandhi or of the socialists. He was clear in his mind about the difference between democratic values and fascism. He believed that justice was on the side of Britain, France, and Poland. But he also believed that Britain and France was imperialist power. British and France were imperialist powers, and that the war was the result of the inner contradictions of capitalism maturing since the end of the World War One. He therefore advocated no Indian participation till India itself was free. However, at the same time, no advantage was to be taken of Britain's difficulty by starting an immediate civil disobedience movement. Gandhi was more or less isolated in this stand. In the end, he decided to go with Nehru's position, which was adopted by the Congress Working Committee. The Congress Working Committee resolution condemned fascist aggression. Okay, it said that India should be party to a war being fought on the face of it for democratic freedoms, while that freedoms was being denied to India. If Britain was fighting for democracy and freedom, it should be proved by ending imperialism or in its colonies, okay, and establishing full democracy in India. Okay, the government should declare its war aims soon, and also as to how the principles of democracy were to be applied to India after the war. The Congress leader wanted to give every chance to the viceroy and British government. So government attitude and Congress ministers resignation. The government's response was entirely negative. Viceroy Lindley, in his statements made on October 17, 1939, tried to use Muslim League, okay, and the princes against the Congress. The government refused to redefine British war aims beyond stating that Britain was resisting aggressions. It would, as part of future arrangement, consult interest in India and the Indian princes as to how the Act of 1935 be modified, said it would immediately set up a consultative committee whose advice could be sought whenever required. Government's hidden agenda. Lindnit's statement was not an aberration, but a part of the general British policy to take advantage of the war to regain the lost ground from the Congress by provoking the Congress into a confrontation with the government and then using the extraordinary situation to acquire democratic powers. Even before the declaration of the war, emergency power had been acquired, for the center in respect of provincial subjects by amending the 1935 Act. Defense of India, defense of the ordinance had been enforced the day enforced the day the war was declared, thus restricting civil liberties. In May 1940, the 8th Secret draft revolutionary movement ordinance had been prepared aimed at launching crippling preemptive strikes on the Congress. The government would then call upon the Allied troops stationed in India. It could also win an unusual amount of stationed in India, so it would win unusual amount of liberal and leftist sympathy all over the world by painting an aggressive Congress on being pro-Japan and pro-Germany. So British Indian reactionary policies will receive full support from the Prime Minister of Britain, Winston Churchill, and the Secretary of the State, Zetland, who branded the Congress as a purely Hindu organization. So it became clear that the British government had no intention of losing its hold during or after the war, and was willing to treat the Congress as an enemy. Gandhi reacted sharply to the government insensitivity to Indian public opinion. There is to be democratic. There is to be no democracy for India in Britain can prevent it. So India, if the British can prevent it, referring to the minorities and other special interest, Gandhi said. Congress will safeguard minorities' rights, provided they do not advance claims inconsistent with India's independence. So Gandhi said Congress will safeguard minorities' rights, provided they do not advance claims inconsistent with India's independence. Congress ministers decided to resign. On October 23, 1939, the Congress Working Committee meetings rejected the Vice Regal statement as a reiteration of the old imperialist policy, decided not to support the war. We called upon the Congress ministries to resign in the provinces. Debate on the question of immediate mass satyagraha. So after the Lindnit's statement of October 1939, the debate on the question of the immediate mass struggle began. So once again, Gandhi and his supporters were not in favor of an immediate struggle, because they felt that the aimed cause was just to be communal sensitiveness, and lack of Hindu-Muslim unity could result in communal riots. Congress organization was in semblance, and the atmosphere was not conducive for a mass struggle. Masses were not ready for a struggle. They instead advocated tuning up the Congress organization, carrying on political work among the masses, and negotiating till all possibilities of a negotiation settlement. So here the settlement exhausted. Only then would the struggle be begun. In January 1940, Lindnit was stated dominion status of Westminster variety. In 1940, Lindnit started dominion status of Westminster variety. After the war, is the goal of British policy in India. In its meeting in Allahabad in November 1939, the Congress Working Committee passed a resolution observing urging that the course of the war and the policy parts by the British and French government and in particular the declaration made on behalf of the British government in regard to India seem to demonstrate the present war, like the World War and of 1940 to 1914 to 1918 in the is being carried on for imperialist ends, and the British imperialist is to remain entrenched in India. Okay, with such a war and with this policy, the Congress cannot associate itself, and it cannot be continence to exploitations of India's resources to this end. It was reiterated that India's independence and of the right of Indians to frame their constitution, though the Constituent Assembly should be recognized, and that it was only through such a Constituent Assembly that communal and other problems could be tackled. The Ramgarh session of the Congress was held in March 1940 with Maulana Abul Kalam Azad in the President's chair. All agreed that a battle must be waged, but there was disagreement over the form. It was decided to leave the form of the and timing to Gandhi. Yeah, the Ramgarh session of the Congress was held in March 1940 with Maulana Abul Kalam Azad in the President's chair, and all agreed that a battle must be waged, but there was a disagreement over the form. It was decided to leave the form and timing to Gandhi, but even now Gandhi was in favor of continued cooperation of the provincial level. You see, he said that he would offer the British moral supporting during the war, but on a non-violent basis. However, Jawaharlal Nehru reiterated that complete independence for India must be a precondition for Congress support to the British. This was continued with his strong militant stand to take action against the colonial government, forcing the East to agree to the grant of freedom. Once again, he pointed out that the Britain's the difficulty was to be seized as India's opportunity. Okay, the Congress declared that at the session that the people of India would accept nothing short of complete independence. Indian freedom could be not in the form of freedom could be not be in the form of dominion or any other status within the imperial structure. So within imperial structure, sovereignty said that the Congress resolution must rest with the people. Okay, whether in the states, the princely states or the princely states or the provinces, it was also decided that Congress would resort the civil disobedience as soon as the Congress in the organization. As soon as the Congress organization is considered fit enough, or if circumstances participate. So, a crisis. So next, Pakistan resolution.